They told you Ra was a story, a sun god from a distant, primitive world, painted on tomb walls and tourist brochures. A hawk-headed figure with a glowing disc, sailing across the sky in a golden boat. Interesting for a documentary, maybe. Harmless, safely sealed in the past. That is how a myth is supposed to feel, separate from you. Decorative, dead. But some stories refuse to stay dead. They follow you in strange ways. A symbol you keep noticing. A name that feels heavier than it should. A quiet pull you can't explain when you stand under the same sun those people once worshipped or thought they did. Because the initiates of Kemet, the land you were taught to call Egypt, were not writing fan fiction about a ball of fire in the sky. They were pointing with the best language they had at a direct encounter with something so vast that it would not fit into ordinary words. They called that presence Ra. Over time, the experience faded and the symbol remained. And the symbol, like so many others, was flattened into myth. So let's quietly roll the story back to its beginning. Before Ra was a character in a pantheon, he was a way of naming the first thing. Not first as in a date, but first as in the ground behind every date. The light before light. The awareness that was already there before anything appeared. When you hear light, your mind goes to physics, photons, wavelengths, the invisible spectrum. The people of Kemet knew that kind of light. They lived by it. They farmed by it. But when they whispered the name Ra in their temples, they were reaching past brightness into something more fundamental. They were pointing to the moment consciousness wakes up. Think of the instant you open your eyes in the morning. For a heartbeat, there is no name, no story, no past or future. There is only a simple fact. I am. It is fragile. Within seconds, your mind fills in everything you forgot. But that first bare awareness comes first. Now imagine that moment on a cosmic scale. Imagine a universe that has not yet taken on form, like an ocean of possibility with no waves. The Egyptians called that ocean Nun, the primordial waters. In their creation hymns, Ra emerges from those waters not because something else made him, but because awareness stirred and recognized itself. I am, not in human language, but as a raw realization. In that image, Ra is not a man with a bird's head. Ra is the first light of consciousness rising out of the dark. From that first light, everything else unfolds. Not like a factory line, but like a tree from a seed. Stars are light taking on structure. Worlds are light becoming ground. Bodies are light becoming vessels. Minds are light becoming mirrors that can eventually turn around and notice what is shining through them. You are one of those mirrors. This is where the story stops being about an old civilization and quietly becomes about you. Because if Ra is a name for the original field of awareness, then the real question is not did Ra really exist, but how connected am I to that field right now, in this breath? The people of Kemet would have said that humanity's real problem was not that we broke a rule, but that we forgot our origin. The temples were not built to calm an angry deity in the sky. They were built as places where people could be carefully reminded of what they were made of, the same stuff as that first light. If that sounds grand good, it is supposed to stretch you a little, because there's a quiet kind of damage in being told from the start that whatever is holy lives somewhere far away from you, in the clouds, in someone else's hands, locked behind texts you must never question. When divinity is always out there, something in you goes dim in here. You stop trusting your own inner sense of rightness. You learn to ignore the voice that speaks in the still moments. You shrink, not because you were born small, but because the story you were given about yourself is small. That kind of remembering is difficult for systems built on fear. It is easier to manage human beings who believe they are cut off from the source, dependent on external authority for access to truth. It is harder to manage people who feel, even quietly, that the same light that moves the stars is breathing in their chest. So over centuries, teachings about inner divinity are pushed to the edges, dressed in superstition, or reduced to children's stories. Ra becomes just mythology, just a cartoon sun god, just a chapter in a textbook. Meanwhile, the original experience waits. Every morning, there is still that tiny moment where you wake before you remember your life. Every time you drop into deep presence, in meditation, in music, in love, in grief, there's still that sense that a larger field is holding you. You may not call it anything. You may not have a philosophy for it, but you feel it. The people who lived with that feeling at the center of their world chose to give it a name. They chose Ra. In the old hymns, he is praised as Father of the Gods, the one whose light moves through all forms. That language is poetic, but it carries a simple, esoteric idea. There is one consciousness playing all the roles. You listening to this are one of those roles. This is why some spiritual texts insist this is not mythology. This is memory. They are not asking you to copy an ancient cosmology. They are nudging you to notice a particular kind of recognition, the one that doesn't sound like, oh, I learned something new but strange. I've always sort of known this. You know that feeling. A symbol that hits you harder than it should. A dream that feels more real than the morning. A sunrise that feels like it is not just happening, but speaking. These are small ways that the deeper layers of your own mind and spirit tap you on the shoulder. From an esoteric point of view, that is where Ra lives now, as a pattern in your consciousness that lights up when you turn toward it. Remembering rarely begins with thunder and visions. It usually starts with a question that won't leave you alone. What if there is more here than I was taught? What if I am more than the story I inherited? The moment you ask those sincerely, you have already taken a step back toward the first light. So let that question walk with you. The next time you step outside and feel the warmth of the sun on your face, don't rush past it. Just notice whether something in you responds, the way an old friend might lift their head when they hear a familiar voice. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to force belief. Just allow for the possibility that the light touching your skin and the light watching from behind your eyes are not strangers to each other. And somewhere, underneath all the noise, an ancient name stirs. Ra. Once you start to sense Ra as that first, quiet awareness, the sun itself stops being just background scenery. It becomes a kind of moving altar in the sky, a daily reminder of something your nervous system already depends on, even if your mind rarely thinks about it. From a distance, the sun is simple enough, a star, a sphere of nuclear fire burning in empty space. That is true. What the ancients of Kemet would question is the idea that this is the whole story, because they never treated the sun as a dead object. To them, it was alive in a way our language doesn't easily capture. Think about how intimate your relationship with that light actually is. You have never lived a single day without its influence. Your sleep cycles, your hormones, your mood, even your sense of time are all quietly shaped by the rhythm of that star. Plants take sunlight and turn into the food you eat. Your skin uses it to make vitamin D. Your eyes evolved to match its spectrum. Every biological system in you is, in some way, a response to the sun. The priests of Kemet looked at this and did not just see biology. They saw a kind of conversation. For them, light was not only illumination, it was communication. The rays falling onto the Nile, into the fields, onto their skin were not just energy, but messages from Ra, encoded in a language that the body, the psyche, and the soul could all read in different ways. You already know that sunlight changes how you feel. A dark winter day can pull you inward and heavy. A bright morning can lift you before anything happens. On a purely physical level, that is chemistry. On a deeper level, it is rhythm. Your system is aligning with a greater field. The ancient builders took this seriously enough to carve stone around it. Walk through the ruins of temples with this idea in mind, and you start to notice strange things. Corridors that seem to lead nowhere, small chambers placed so precisely that at one exact day of the year, at one exact hour, a beam of sunlight reaches all the way inside and touches a single wall, a single statue, a single glyph. To a tourist, is a cool photo. To the people who built it, it was a time transmission. This is what it means to treat the sun as a living library. Not a metaphorical library, but a real, daily source of information that interacts with you. Just as your body reads sunlight for time and warmth, your deeper layers can read it for something else. A sense of connection, a feeling of guidance, a shock of clarity that seems to come from nowhere and yet feels right. Modern language tends to separate these things. Physics over here, psychology over there, spirituality somewhere else. The people of Kemet did not draw those lines the same way. For them, Ra's light moved through all levels at once. On the physical, it made crops grow and bodies thrive. On the mental, it symbolized clarity, insight, the lifting of confusion. On the spiritual, it was the presence of the first light reminding the soul of where it came from. That is why they aligned temples, statues, even entire city plans with solar events. Not to show off their engineering, but to place human attention inside the rhythm of the cosmos. If Ra was the original awareness, then sunlight was his handwriting, and the sky was the page. You have your own version of those temples, even if you have never set foot in Egypt. Think of the places where the sun has moved you without asking permission. A beam of light cutting into a dark room at just the right angle. The way the late afternoon glow turns ordinary streets into a soft gold. The hush that sometimes falls during a sunrise or sunset, even in busy cities, as if something in everyone's chest pauses for a second. You might call those moments aesthetic, or sentimental, or nothing at all. But something in you knows they matter. They are small initiations, tiny ceremonies hosted by the sky. For a breath or two, your awareness syncs with a larger pattern and you feel a quiet rightness, even if your problems haven't changed. The inner meaning of Ra says, pay attention there. Pay attention when light itself seems to carry meaning, when it feels like more than brightness. Those are not accidents. They are openings. You do not have to force interpretations or hunt for secret symbols in the clouds. You only need to notice how your own system responds. Because in a very real sense, you are one of Ra's temples. Your eyes are aligned to receive his visible spectrum. Your skin is tuned to his warmth. Your brain's chemistry dances to his rise and fall. And underneath all of that, your awareness, the same awareness we spoke of in the first section, is watching this entire process happen. When you stand in the sun and fall quiet for a moment, you are reenacting an ancient ritual without realizing it. You're letting the living library wash over you and through you. You are saying, with your body and not your words, I remember that I am part of this. You do not need to believe that the sun is a person to feel that. You only need to relax the habit of treating the universe as dead. This is the doorway the Egyptians built their spiritual science around. To them, Ra was not worshipped because they were afraid. Ra was honored because they recognized that without this living exchange with light, everything collapses. Bodies fail, minds darken, souls forget. They had no interest in forgetting. So they engineered a civilization as a conversation with the sun. They rose with it, planted with it, built with it. They tracked its slightest shifts with great precision. And in the heart of their structures, they created spaces where human beings could meet that light in focused, intentional ways, not to ask for favors, but to remember what they truly are. What if, for a while, you let yourself imagine that every ray of sunlight is a line in a book being written directly into your life? Not in grand, dramatic messages, but in subtle adjustments, a softened mood here, a moment of courage there, a sudden, quiet knowing that you are not as alone as your thoughts say you are. It does not require you to leave your current beliefs behind. It only asks that you widen them enough to let a little more light in. Because to the ancient mind, and to the part of you that still remembers, Ra is not just the star you orbit. He is the ongoing act of illumination itself. The way existence keeps revealing itself to itself in every sunrise, in every insight, and every time your own heart suddenly feels brighter than it did a moment before. And the more you notice that, the more the world around you begins to look less like a collection of separate objects and more like a single, living pattern of light, endlessly rearranging, all of it somehow held together by an intelligence that feels strangely familiar. The same intelligence they once drew with a disk above a hawk's head, sailing across the sky. As long as the sun is high, it's easy to stay with the bright side of RA warmth. Clarity, colors sharp and alive. Everything looks knowable when the world is lit from above. But every single day, without fail, that light slides toward the horizon. Shadows stretch, edges soften, the sky bruises into deeper tones. And then, at some point, the same sun you were just standing under is gone. Not destroyed, just out of sight. To us, sunset is mostly beautiful or inconvenient. To the ancients of Kemet, it was the beginning of a secret half of the story. On the outside, the myth sounds simple. Each night, RA steps into his solar boat and descends below the western horizon into Duat, the underworld. There he travels through 12 regions of darkness, confronted again and again by the great serpent Apep. If the journey succeeds, RA and his crew reach the eastern horizon by dawn. The sun rises. Life continues. He dies, he journeys, he returns. If you leave it there, it's just a cosmic loop. Sun goes down, sun comes up. But the priests and initiates didn't treat it as distant sky drama. They treated it as a mirror for the human soul. Ra's night voyage was a way of saying, here is what happens inside you when your own light disappears for a while. Because your life is not all noon, either. There are seasons when your inner sun sinks. A relationship that felt like forever suddenly ends. A job you wrapped your identity around falls apart. Someone you love dies, and the whole world loses its color. Or maybe nothing dramatic happens at all. You simply wake up one day and notice that what once felt meaningful now feels empty. The things that used to excite you don't. The story you've been living in no longer fits. Modern psychology calls this depression, burnout, breakdown, crisis. Older language called it descent. That descent is your personal Duat. The Egyptians did not picture Duat as a cartoon hell where bad people are tortured forever. It was a realm of testing, transition, and truth. A strange dreamland where things shift shape, where gates appear in the dark, where guides and monsters both show up, and where the soul is stripped of whatever cannot survive the light of morning. In that sense, Duat looks a lot like the unconscious in psychology, the place where all the things you've pushed away still live. Old griefs, buried rage, shame you never wanted to look at, fears you learned not to talk about, desires you told yourself were wrong, stories about yourself that you never consciously chose but quietly swallowed anyway. When your outer life is bright and busy, you can keep all that pushed to the edges. There's enough noise to drown it out. But when your sun sets, when a loss or shock or exhaustion cuts through the distractions, those buried forces rise up. They move closer. They speak louder. Parts of your own psyche that you manage to ignore suddenly become impossible to avoid. In Egyptian art, that rising of inner chaos is drawn as a serpent. Apep, enormous, coiled beneath Ra's boat, try to swallow it or drag it backward into oblivion. In your inner world, Apep is not a literal monster. It's the voice that whispers, "This is too much. You can't handle this. You are alone. Nothing means anything. What's the point?" You know that voice. You've heard it at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, when your mind decides to replay every mistake you've ever made. You've heard it after rejection, when one painful no tries to rewrite your entire worth. You've heard it in moments when you dared to change something in your life, and another part you laughed and said, "Who are you kidding? You'll just fail again." The myth does not say Apep should not exist. It says RA meets Apep every night. This is where the story shifts from religion into psychology and spiritual philosophy. The descent into Duat is not a sign RA has failed as a god. It is part of his function. Order has to pass through chaos to renew itself. Light has to pass through darkness to realize what in it cannot be put out. You live that same pattern every time something in your life collapses, and afterwards, you find that you are somehow truer than before. You see it when a breakup finally forces you to notice how much of yourself you were shrinking. When a job loss pushes you to admit you never really wanted that career to begin with. When grief shatters your old beliefs and you're left with fewer answers, but a much more honest relationship with life. In those moments, the you that was built from roles and expectations starts to fall apart. Costumes come off, masks slip. The tidy identity you presented to the world and to yourself no longer holds. What remains may feel raw, but it's more real. The Egyptians pictured Ra passing through 12 gates in the night. On one level, those gates marked hours. On another, they were thresholds in the soul. Each gate demands something different. One gate might ask you to let go of being liked by everyone. Another demands you face the fear of being alone. Another forces you to admit, finally, that something you've been clinging to is already dead. The moment when you feel both the pressure to change and the terror of changing, that's a gate. At those thresholds, it is very tempting to turn back. You numb out with distractions. You bury yourself in work. You scroll until your eyes ache. You cling harder to whatever story feels safest, even if it's making you miserable. In the language of the myth, that's when the serpent wraps around the boat. Not because you're being punished, but because the journey stalls. The light doesn't complete its passage through the dark. What makes RA a guide rather than just a symbol is that he keeps going. Night after night, gate after gate, the boat doesn't stop. In terms of inner work, that looks like this. You keep showing up for your own experience, even when it's messy. You let sadness be sadness, instead of immediately shaming yourself for being weak. You allow anger to move through you without letting it drive you to cruelty. You sit in not knowing without grabbing the first fake certainty just to calm your anxiety. In psychological language, this is shadow work. In esoteric language, it's initiation. Either way, it's the same movement, down through up, because darkness is not the enemy of light. It is the environment where the depth of your light is revealed. It's easy to say, I'm strong, when everything is going your way. It's easy to say, I trust life, when life feels like a well-behaved story. Do it asks a different set of questions. Who are you in control is gone. What remains when your titles, your roles, your old explanations are stripped away? What is solid in you when nothing outside you is? The myth answers without preaching. It just shows you Ra's motion, down into the west, through the hidden regions, up again in the east. Every morning, RA returns. Whatever storms he faced, whatever attacks Apep made, the sky still brightens. The disk still rises. It's not a brand new sun. It's the same light, renewed. The Egyptians took sunrise as proof. Whatever happens in the depths, the core light is not destroyed. It may be challenged. It may be obscured. It may be temporarily swallowed by shadow. But it is not gone. Your own life quietly confirms this more than you might notice. Think of a time when you were sure, this is it. I will never recover from this. Maybe it was a heartbreak, a loss, a humiliation, a collapse of something you thought would always be there. If you're listening to this now, that night didn't last forever. You didn't go back to who you were before. Something in you shifted. Maybe you became softer with other people's pain. Maybe you stopped tolerating shallow relationships. Maybe your sense of what is truly important narrowed to a few simple, solid things. Maybe your definition of sacred expanded beyond the boundaries you were given as a child. The people of Kemet would say, that was you, riding with RA through your own do-it. You don't have to adopt their gods or their language to feel the truth of the pattern. It shows up everywhere. In the dark night of the soul, mystics write about, in the hero's descent into the underworld in countless myths, in the breakdown many people hid at midlife when the old trick stopped working. Different stories, same landscape. The esoteric reading of Ra's night journey simply ties that landscape back to the first light. It tells you, descent isn't proof something has gone wrong. It's part of the design. The question is not, how do I avoid the underworld, but how do I travel it consciously? Sometimes that starts with a small shift. The next time you feel yourself sliding into an inner night, instead of instantly labeling it as failure, you pause. You ask quietly, what if this is a gate? What is being stripped away? What truth is this darkness forcing me to see? This doesn't make the pain pleasant. The myth doesn't ask you to enjoy suffering or glamorize trauma. Loss hurts. Fear is real. Some wounds take a long time to heal. What it does say is that even there, in the thick of it, something in you remains steady. That something is the same awareness we spoke of when RA first emerged from the waters of none. The simple, wordless I am behind all your changing experiences. When you can sense it, the quiet witness behind your thoughts, watching even your fear and despair, you have found the light of RA inside your own do it. It might feel small, like a candle in an enormous cave, but a candle is enough to see the next step. And if you keep taking those steps, dawn comes. You don't emerge as the old version of yourself. The self that entered the underworld cannot make the return trip, but something truer can. Something that feels less like a performance and more like presence. That is the promise hidden in the images of boats and serpents and stars. Do not mistake the loss of old light for the death of light itself. Do not mistake the presence of shadow for the absence of the sun. Trust the rhythm you were born from. Because in the deepest sense, you're not just watching RA cross the sky. You are breathing in his rhythm. Every time you fall, face what waits in the dark and rise a little clearer, a little more honest, a little more alive. The cosmic story is repeating itself through you. And that first light, the one that spoke itself into being from the silent waters, has never forgotten you, even in the nights when you forget yourself. If Ra's journey through the underworld is about surviving the dark, the Eye of RA is about what happens when you finally turn the light back on inside. We're used to eyes as symbols of surveillance. Cameras watching, authorities watching, a God in the sky, watching and waiting to judge. So when modern people hear the Eye of RA, they often imagine a cosmic security system, a glare from above. It sounds harsh, suspicious, even a little threatening. That alone shows how far the story drifted. In the oldest layers of the tradition, the Eye of RA was not a warning that you were being watched. It was a reminder that you were meant to wake up. The Eye didn't exist to scare you into obedience. It existed to help you see what is real. To the people of Kemet, the Eye was not just a picture. It was a living force, an extension of RA himself, sent out into the world to restore balance, correct distortion, and shine into the corners where lies like to hide. When the myths say the Eye of RA travels, searches, returns, they're not describing a floating ball of light haunting the desert. They're mapping something much closer, the way awareness moves through your own life. You've already felt it. Think of the times you just knew something before the reasons caught up. You couldn't explain it clearly, but every part of you leaned in one direction. A person whose smile didn't match the feeling in the room. A situation that looked fine on paper but felt wrong in your chest. An invitation that everyone praised while something deeper in you quietly shook its head. Maybe you listened. Maybe you talked yourself out of it. Either way, that first flash, that quiet inner no or yes, is very close to what the ancients meant by inner sight. The Eye of RA lives there. Psychology calls this intuition, pattern recognition, the unconscious processing far more data than your conscious mind can track. Esoteric language calls it the third eye, the inner vision behind your forehead. Spiritual traditions speak of the eye of the heart, the organ that knows truth by resonance, not by argument. Different words, same function. It's the part of you that can feel when something is true before you have proof, and sense when something is false even if everyone around you believes it. It picks up when energy and words don't match. It notices when your life is out of alignment long before the crash. Most of us are trained from early on to distrust this. We are rewarded for following rules and punished for following our gut. We are taught to value what can be measured and mocked for listening to what can only be felt. Be reasonable, they say, meaning ignore the part of you that doesn't fit into the spreadsheet. Over time, the muscle of inner seeing atrophies. We stop asking ourselves, what does this feel like in my body? And ask only, what does this look like on the surface? The eye of RA closes, not because it dies, but because we stop turning toward it. In the old myths, there's a story where the eye is torn apart, scattered, and then reassembled. The restored eye becomes a symbol of healing and wholeness. The Egyptians even used its parts as a way of talking about fractions, adding them together into a number just shy of 1, as if to say, even full vision leaves space for mystery. Hidden in that image is a simple truth. Seeing clearly is not the same as controlling everything. To reopen your inner eye is not to become all-knowing. It is to become honest. It is to let your perception be as whole as it can be, while humbly acknowledging that a piece of the picture will always belong to the unknown. Without that humility, vision twists into paranoia. You start to imagine threats that aren't there, to project your own shadows onto others, to confuse fear with insight. The eye of RA, in its awakened form, cuts through that. It doesn't feed on fear. It burns through it. Imagine it less as a spotlight and more as a flame behind your forehead. When it's lit, you don't just look at the world, you look into it. You feel the tone behind the words. You hear the intention beneath the explanation. You sense the pattern underneath the chaos. You also see your own motives more honestly. The little manipulations, the escapes, the moments you say, I don't know why I did that, even though if you looked a little closer, you could know. This kind of seeing can be uncomfortable. To open the eye is to lose certain illusions you may have been living on for years. The stories you told yourself about who you are and who others are start to crack. Masks fall off. Roles blur. The neat categories you use to sort people into stop working. But something else becomes available in their place. A more direct relationship with reality. You stop needing other people's approval quite as desperately because you can feel your own alignment. You no longer swallow every story the culture tells you because some part of you tests it against an inner standard. You begin to notice how often fear is dressed up as wisdom, how often control is disguised as care. This is why, in so many ancient cultures, seeing and dangerous lived very close together. A person who truly sees is hard to manage. They're not perfect. They're not above mistakes. But they are less likely to abandon their own knowing just to belong. From the perspective of a system built on obedience, that is a problem. So the eye of RA, like many symbols of inner power, was slowly recoded. Over time, it became associated with wrath, punishment, the God who strikes you down for stepping out of line. The gentle invitation to look within became a threat from above. The effect is subtle but powerful. If you believe the eye in the sky is out to judge you, you will spend your life looking over your shoulder. You will police yourself from the outside. You will feel watched but never truly seen. Meanwhile, the eye that could actually help you, the one inside, stays half asleep. Part of remembering RA is flipping that story back. Not by throwing away reason and evidence, but by letting your deeper perception back into the conversation. By recognizing that there is a light in you designed to reveal, not to condemn. A light that doesn't scream, but quietly insists, something here is off, or yes, this is right for you, or simply, look again. That whisper can come in many forms. It might be a dream so vivid you wake up with your heart pounding, certain that the image meant something, even if you can't immediately say what. It might be a tightness in your chest every time you walk into a particular place, a bodily no that won't be talked away. It might be a sudden ease when you finally admit a truth you've been avoiding. The rational mind can learn to work with this instead of against it. When the eye is open, logic and intuition stop fighting and start collaborating. Logic checks for blind spots and helps you communicate what you see. Intuition reaches into the fields logic can't touch. Together, they give you a vision that is both grounded and deep. In esoteric terms, this is the balance of the two eyes. Your physical eyes show you surfaces, shapes, colors, forms. They are invaluable. They keep you alive in the physical world. The eye of RA shows you patterns, energies, meanings. It lives behind the physical eyes, in that quiet space where thoughts appear and disappear. You cannot point to it on a scan, but you can feel when it opens. You catch yourself pausing more often before reacting. You listen for the tone beneath the words. You start to notice that when you ignore that inner check, things tend to go sideways. When you honor it, even if it leads you down a harder path, there's a strange peace in you, as if you were walking with a light, not stumbling in the dark. This is not about becoming mystical in some dramatic way. It can be as simple as setting down your phone for a few minutes, closing your eyes, and asking, what am I really feeling about my life right now? Not what you're supposed to feel, not what you've been told to feel, what you actually feel. And then, crucially, not judging the answer. That simple act of honest looking, done again and again, is like brushing dust from an old symbol carved into stone. The more you do it, the clearer the lines become. The clearer they become, the easier it is for light to catch them and reflect. The eye of RA doesn't appear as a glowing glyph on your forehead. It appears as you, slowly, steadily becoming a person who sees more clearly than before. A person who can walk into a room and feel what is happening beneath the polite conversation. A person who can notice their own fear and still choose from love. A person who can recognize when something in the world is out of balance and quietly refuse to participate in the lie. You don't have to call it RA. You don't have to adopt any particular symbol at all. What matters is that you remember you are not meant to move through life half-blind, trusting only what can be photographed and measured. There is an eye in you that does not live in your skull. It lives in your awareness itself, and it has been waiting patiently for you to turn back toward it and say, show me. Not show me everything. Just show me the next honest thing I need to see. That is enough to begin. Once you begin to see more clearly, another question arrives almost on its own. If there's this light behind my thoughts, this quiet awareness that watches everything I do and feel, what is it, really? Is it just my consciousness? Or is it part of something larger? The people of Kemet answered that with one word, RA. Not RA as a character in the sky, but RA as the one feel behind every sky, every mind, every story. For them, RA wasn't one god in a crowd of gods. He was the background that made gods possible in the first place. The canvas behind every painting. The silence that every sound comes out of and returns to. In their creation myths, RA is often fused with another name, Adam. Adam RA, the self-created one. The being who doesn't come from anyone or anything else. He simply is. He arises from the waters of none the way a thought rises in your mind out of nowhere. No cause, no parent, just the first quiet recognition. I exist. That idea is bigger than religion. It's metaphysics. It says, underneath this entire universe, there is one presence that is aware. It knows itself as stars and dust and oceans and animals and humans. It wears every mask, speaks every language, and lives every life, but behind all of the differences, it is still itself. Different cultures touched that same realization and gave it different names. In India, mystics called it Brahman, the formless reality behind all forms. In China, Taoists called it the Tao, the way that cannot be fully named. Early Christian mystics spoke of the Logos, the word through which all things were made. Gnostic texts spoke of the monad, the one beyond all opposites. You can feel how they're all pointing in the same direction, towards something so vast it cannot be owned by a single tradition. Kemet's name for that presence was RA. Imagine all these traditions as different windows in the same house. Look through any one of them long enough, past the decorations and doctrines, and you start to see the same light shining through. The details differ. The essence does not. When the priests of Kemet stood in their temples and chanted hymns to Ra, they were not praising a distant ruler. They were aligning their own consciousness with that vast background. They were saying, in their own way, let the small mind remember that it floats inside a greater mind. This is where mythology quietly crosses into psychology. Because if there really is one field of awareness behind everything, then your sense of me is not its starting point. It's a local expression. The wave, not the ocean. The flame, not the fire itself. The Egyptians described the soul as having many aspects. Two of the most important were the Ba and the Ka. The Ba was the changing, personal part of you. Your character, your habits, your particular way of walking through the world. The Ka was the vital essence, the spark that never changes, the part of you that cannot be reduced to your history or your personality. The Ka, they said, comes from Ra, not symbolically, directly. It is the ray in you from the first light. When you awaken spiritually, it is not the Ba that wakes up first. It is the Ka remembering where it came from. You may have felt small glimpses of this without having words for it. Moments where your usual identity drops away and something larger, quieter, more stable takes its place. You're still you, but at the same time you feel that you is not the whole story. You're being lived by something deeper. It might happen while watching a sunset or holding a newborn, or in the middle of a crisis when for one clear second, panic breaks and you feel a strange calm you didn't create. Sometimes it happens in meditation, sometimes in the middle of ordinary life, washing dishes, driving, sitting in a waiting room. The activity doesn't matter. The quality of awareness does. For a breath or two, the lines between me and everything else soften. You feel less like a separate object and more like a part of one continuous field. There's often a sweetness in it, and a kind of simple truth that doesn't need explanation. It just is. From the perspective of Ra, that is reality peeking through the costume. The costume is still important. Your individuality matters. Your choices matter. Your story matters. Esoteric traditions are not asking you to erase your humanity. They're asking you to recognize what your humanity is rooted in. You're not a random accident. You're a particular way the one light is choosing to experience itself right now. When that sinks in, even a little, certain fears begin to loosen their grip. The fear of being not enough in some external scale. The fear of being fundamentally alone in the universe. The fear that your life is meaningless unless someone else approves of it. It's not that those fears vanish overnight. They're woven into culture and conditioning, and they come back. But each time you remember the deeper ground, they have a little less authority. This is also why teachings like this tend to be hidden, distorted, or pushed to the margins. A person who knows in their bones that their consciousness is an extension of the one source is hard to control. They may still follow laws, still work, still pay bills, but they no longer confuse external approval with inner worth. They no longer worship systems that demand they disconnect from themselves. They become less interested in chasing power over others and more interested in aligning with the power that moves through everything. You can feel how different those two orientations are. One says, if I can just climb high enough, collect enough, dominate enough, then I'll be safe. The other says, if I can remember what I am made of, then I can move through this world without losing myself, no matter what happens around me. The first builds empires. The second builds presence. In a world organized around fear and scarcity, presence looks suspicious. A person who is inwardly steady is harder to scare into line. So the story of Ra's oneness had to be softened, shuffled, or turned into a harmless myth. Safer to keep Ra as a sun god in a museum than as a living reminder that you and the universe are made of the same awareness. But suppressing the teaching doesn't erase the truth it points to. It still whispers underneath things. In children who ask strange, deep questions long before they learn what they are supposed to believe. In artists who feel their best work comes through them, not from them. In ordinary people who, faced with tragedy, find something inside themselves that is larger than grief, even as they cry. You don't have to force yourself into grand, mystical states to touch this. You can start with something simple. Notice the awareness that is hearing these words right now. Not the thoughts about the words. Not the opinions, likes or dislikes. The bare fact that you are aware, that you know you are here, that you can watch your own mind moving the way you would watch clouds crossing a sky. That sky is RA, not as a person, not as an object, as the open space in which every experience appears. The same kind of open space that has been watching your life from the beginning, through every change, through every role. It has never been harmed. It has never grown old. It has never been improved by praise or diminished by blame. It simply is. To remember that even a little is to step into what the Egyptians meant by divine lineage. You are not a subject trying to win the favor of a god. You are a branch of the same light, learning to recognize itself. From that place, spiritual practice stops being about earning points with a distant ruler and becomes a way of clearing whatever blocks your own perception. Meditation, prayer, ritual, therapy, honest conversation, time in nature, all of these become tools to peel back layers of confusion so that the underlying awareness can shine more freely. RA doesn't demand your worship. RA is what you are when you stop forgetting. By now, you can probably feel how different this original vision of RA is from the version most of us were handed. And that raises a sharp question. If RA is a name for the one light, for inner awakening and direct connection, how did that ever get reduced to a cartoon sun god in a schoolbook? The answer isn't just historical. It's psychological. Any system built on external authority has a problem with people who know how to look within. If your worth comes from your connection to source, you're much harder to frighten. If your guidance comes from the eye inside, you're less dependent on the voices outside. And if your identity is rooted in the one light behind all things, you're less likely to sell your soul for a place in any hierarchy. So over time, teachings like those of Kemet are not usually erased in one dramatic act. They're diluted, reframed, dressed up as primitive superstition, folded into narratives where the victors are enlightened and the conquered are foolish. It's easier to rule if you convince people that the deepest wisdom of their ancestors was nothing more than sun worship and animal-headed gods. The conquerors of Kemet didn't just take land and gold. They took memory. They renamed the land. They rebranded its history. They presented its temples as curiosities instead of technologies. They dismissed its spiritual science as myth while quietly absorbing pieces of it into their own systems, stripped of their original context. And they did this not only with Egypt, but with many cultures that held similar understandings of light, consciousness, and the inner path. On the surface, this looks like politics and war. Underneath, it's a campaign against a particular kind of knowing, the kind that doesn't need permission. Because if you can convince human beings that they are cut off from source, that they need an institution to mediate between them and the divine, you can shape them far more easily. You can say, we will tell you what is true and what is false. We will tell you which books are holy and which are dangerous. We will tell you which memories you are allowed to keep and which must be forgotten. That is control at the level of story. And story is how the psyche organizes reality. Change the story, and you change what people are able to imagine for themselves. You can see this in smaller ways in your own life. Think of the narratives you absorbed as a child, about what success means, what love should look like, what kind of person you're allowed to be. Those stories didn't just sit in your head. They shaped what you thought was possible. Now imagine that on a civilizational scale. If an entire culture is taught, generation after generation, that divinity lives only outside them, that the light is reserved for saints and prophets and special figures long dead, then the quiet sense of inner radiance begins to feel like a mistake, something to be doubted, ignored, or pathologized. The eye of RA becomes paranoia instead of perception. Do It becomes a place of eternal punishment instead of transformation. RA himself becomes a relic instead of a mirror. And yet, something in human beings keeps pushing back. You can see it in the way mystics and visionaries appear, over and over, in every tradition, often at the edges of their own religions. They speak of direct experience. They talk about union, oneness, inner light. They get in trouble for bypassing the approved channels. Sometimes they're embraced. Often they're silenced. But the pattern keeps repeating. The light finds cracks. Even now, in a world flooded with noise, that same pressure is building. The system has changed shape. Instead of scrolls and stone, we have screens and feeds. Instead of a few priests controlling access to text, we have algorithms controlling access to attention. But the underlying design has similarities. Keep people busy. Keep them divided. Keep them distracted. Keep them so saturated with shallow information that they never have to sit still long enough to feel what is deeper. Because in stillness, memory stirs. Not the memory of your last vacation or your to-do list. A different kind of memory. The one that sounds like I've felt this before when you stand under the sun. Or I've known this all along when you hear a truth spoken clearly. Or I am more than this when life tries to compress you into a role that doesn't fit. From the point of view of RA, that memory is not coming from the past. It's coming from the ground of your being. It was never gone. It was just covered. You don't have to frame this as conspiracy to feel its effects. You can simply notice how much of modern life is organized to keep you from yourself. The endless scroll, the constant comparison, the subtle message that you're always one purchase, one achievement, one improvement away from finally being enough. All of that keeps your attention outward. The return of RA doesn't begin with a new institution or a new religion. It begins the moment your attention turns back in. Maybe it's gentle at first. You sit quietly for a few minutes and watch your breath. You feel the warmth of the sun without reaching for your phone. You ask your own heart what it wants instead of automatically following the path you were handed. You notice the difference between genuine intuition and the anxious voice of old conditioning. On the outside, nothing dramatic is happening. On the inside, everything is. You are loosening the story that says you are just a small mind in a big, indifferent universe. You're giving the larger awareness in your room to breathe. You are letting RA rise, not in the sky, but in your own consciousness. As this deepens, your relationship to the world shifts. You still see the games of power and fear. You still feel pain and grief. You still have to navigate systems that were not built with your wholeness in mind. But you begin to sense that the system is not the final authority on what is real. Is a pattern loud, persistent, often unjust, moving inside a larger field? That field is the same one that held the priests in their temples, the same one that watched over the builders carving stone into impossible precision, the same one that hears these words now. It doesn't belong to any era. It doesn't wear a brand. It simply is. From that perspective, the return of RA is not about the past coming back. It's about the original awareness showing itself more clearly in the present through you and others like you. You can see signs of it everywhere if you look. In people leaving rigid systems to seek a more direct relationship with the divine. In therapists and healers blending psychology with spirituality, acknowledging that trauma and soul are intertwined. In scientists quietly admitting that consciousness is a deeper mystery than we thought. In small communities forming around presence rather than performance. None of these movements is perfect. All can be co-opted. But underneath the mess, the same impulse is moving. Remember that light is not just physical. Remember that your inner life matters. Remember that dissent is not failure. Remember that you have an eye inside, built to see truth. Remember that your awareness is not separate from the awareness that threw the stars into space. You don't have to announce this to anyone. You don't have to argue with people who aren't ready. The most powerful expression of this remembrance is quiet. It's in how you treat the person in front of you, how you listen, how you hold yourself when you're alone, how you choose, again and again, not to betray what you know inside. In that sense, every awakened human being is a temple of RA. Your nervous system becomes the stone. Your breath is the incense. Your insight is the flame. You line up your inner chambers, your thoughts, your emotions, your actions with the light you feel inside, so that when it shines, it can move through you into the world without too much distortion. That is what the conquerors never fully understood. You can break statues. You can bury scrolls. You can rename lands and rewrite histories. But you cannot permanently erase a truth that is encoded in consciousness itself. Eventually, in some era, in some form, it rises again. You're living in one of those eras. The question is not whether RA will return. The question is whether you will recognize that the return is already happening right now, in a simple, radical act of you remembering who and what you truly are. When you reach this point in the story, it's easy for the mind to lean back and say, beautiful ideas. Now what? That's a fair question. Myth and metaphysics are only useful if they touch your actual life. So instead of trying to do something grand with this, let it move in small, real ways. Maybe tomorrow morning, you pause for just a few seconds when the sun comes up, even if it's hidden behind clouds. You remember RA not as a god somewhere else, but as the light of awareness behind your own eyes, watching the sky brighten. You feel, even faintly, that you are inside a larger rhythm. Maybe the next time you sink into a hard night, one of those do-it moments when everything feels heavy and pointless, you put a hand on your chest and quietly tell yourself, this is a gate. I don't have to know where it leads. I only have to keep moving. You don't force positivity. You just stay with yourself a little more gently than you did last time. Maybe when your intuition sends you a clear signal, instead of talking yourself out of it to keep the peace, you experiment with trusting it. You let the eye of RA and you make one small decision, and then you watch what happens. Not with superstition, but with curiosity. And maybe, when you catch yourself believing that you are alone, cut off, meaningless, you bring to mind the image of that first light rising from the waters of none. You remember that if any of this is true, the awareness hearing these words now is a ray from that same light. Not metaphorically, literally. You don't have to convince anyone else of that. You don't even have to convince yourself all at once. You can treat it as a working hypothesis. What happens if I live for a while, as if this is true? Do I become more fearful or less? More rigid or more kind? More numb or more alive? Let the answers come from your own experience. In the end, that is what the myth of RA was always meant to protect. Not belief, but direct contact. Not a set of doctrines, but a way of walking through the world with your inner sun turned on. The priests and builders did their part in stone and story. Now the terrain is different, and the work is yours. If, somewhere in this telling, you felt that strange sense of recognition, that soft, wordless yes in your chest, don't rush past it. Sit with it for a while after this ends. Let echo. Let rearrange a few things inside you. You don't need to name it. You don't need to turn it into content. Just let the light do what it has always done. Rise, fall, return. And as you move through your own days, with their bright highs and deep nights, remember, the full story of RA is not just out there, carved on old walls. It is unfolding in you every time you wake, every time you forget, every time you remember. You are not just hearing the myth, you are living it.